This one is for this weekend's UFC main event between Thiago Santos and Magomed Ankalaev. Lots of reasons to be excited for this one, so let's quick run down tail of the tape. So Thiago Santos 22-9, Magomed Ankalaev 16-1, and we'll come back to that one loss in a moment. Average fight time's pretty similar. You know, both of these guys have got a lot of finishing capacity. 1 inch height advantage for Ankalaev, 1 inch reach advantage for Thiago Santos. We know Thiago Santos. We watched him come through the middleweight division. We know how explosive he is and how dangerous he is. I feel like he's a more healthier version of himself up at light heavyweight, and I think we've seen good performances from him. You know, he won his first 3 in the division. Eric Anders, Jimmy Manuwa, and Jan Blachowicz, which obviously is a very good win. Then he hit the top of the division, lost to John Jones, lost to Glover Teixeira, and lost to Alexander Rakic. He's coming off a win over Johnny Walker, but he's got 1 win in his last 4 fights, which obviously is going to be playing on his mind a little bit, given the fact that he's fighting Magomed Ankalaev, who, in my opinion, is one of the scariest guys in the division. There's no doubt about it. Everybody's keeping an eye on him because they can see that he's got a lot of potential. They can see how lethal he is. He came into the UFC at 9-0. He fought Paul Craig in his UFC debut on the Vadum Volkov card in London and was winning that whole fight. And Paul Craig, like a rabbit out of a hat, pulled out this beautiful triangle and got the submission at 4 minutes 59 of the 3rd round. And immediately you could see Ankalaev walk back to his corner, and he was just... It was a lesson that will stay with him forever, let's put it that way. It's not a loss that he's going to just ignore like nothing happened. That lesson will be learned. It will be very, very difficult to catch him in anything going forward. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He's very calculated and very measured. Sometimes he does get drawn into a firefight, and that's what we saw in the Ion Cutelaba fight. But generally, he's outstriking people. He's using great takedown defense to force people with his striking. And then he's showing us a nice diversity of his game. He's got great kicks from a distance. Being a southpaw, he's got a great left leg. He does have a good front kick as well. We saw that against Dolce Lungiambula. But he also has great punching, great counter punching. He has a lovely right hook that he uses and a lovely split cross, which we've seen him use a few times. He dropped Özdemir with that, caught Cutelaba with it in their rematch. I think he's going to want to strike with Santos, but I do think that he's going to be cautious because Santos is a little bit wild and a little bit explosive. So Santos is at 66% takedown defense. Ankalaev is at 85%, but they're both, 36 and 31% takedown accuracy. I would imagine that this is going to be a kickboxing match until one of them decides that it's not going exactly as according to plan. And going according to plan doesn't necessarily mean, dominating them and knocking them out. What I've seen in Ankalaev's fights is that, if it gets into the second round and he's hitting the person at will and they're still there, like he was against Krylov, then he'll start to grapple a little bit. He will start to use his wrestling, which of course is formidable. But he's a knockout artist. 16 wins on his record, 9 by knockout, 7 by decision. He's not looking to submit people. He's looking to beat them up, whether that's on the floor or on the feet, but definitely a preference on the feet. I also wouldn't be surprised if we see Thiago Santos clinch up at some point and try and grapple, but I also think that might be just a waste of energy for him. And if he does it, it might show that he's not dealing too well with the pressure that he's under. If I'm summarizing, what I'm expecting from Ankalaev is to be confident and to be moving himself into range behind the threat that he's going to throw that left body kick or that left high kick. I think Santos might have a bit of nervous energy and he might be kind of trying to find some space in the octagon away from Ankalaev. He might keep chopping into that leg and switching his stance and chopping into the body with the other leg. But ultimately, I think it's going to be Ankalaev trying to push him back. And if we get those moments where Santos either gets a boost of confidence or he lands something that looks like it's hurt or he throws an inside low kick and Ankalaev's balance is gone, then we might see that crazy rush forward. Whether Ankalaev decides to engage him or not and try and hit him with counter shots, or whether he decides he wants to wrestle to slow him down, that's a big question. But for me, Ankalaev is the better striker. He's the more refined striker. He's the more calculated striker. I think also he's going to be in a place where he's much more confident because he's on a win streak. And the one loss that he had was it must sear in his subconscious all the time, because it's, he was winning the fight, he was dominating it, and he got caught with a beautiful triangle, and he tapped very quickly as well, which I'm sure must haunt him as well. I've got a submission at 4 minutes 59 of the second round, and I always think to myself, God, just like 1 second, I could have gotten a third round. I mean, this was right at the end of the fight, and he'd won. He was walking to the judges' scorecards with a unanimous. That's not the kind of lesson that you forget easily. He's going to be very calculated and very cautious against Santos. But I also don't think he offers the same kind of threat on the floor. If Ankalaev is hurt and he gets dropped, of course Santos is going to follow him to the floor to try and get the finish. But the danger for Santos is having his patience broken, basically. Doing a little bit like what happens with Peter Yan's fights. He walks people down without doing anything. He covers them, switches orthodox to southpaw, making sure that they constantly feel pressured and constantly feel like there's a threat that something's going to happen. So then they start to throw when they don't really want to. This is a really fun fight. I think we're going to see what Ankalaev is made of and where he's going to sit in this light heavyweight division. Santos is a very good test for him, but I honestly feel like there's something special and something a bit scary about Ankalaev, and I think he's got the skills all around, as well as the fight IQ, from what I can tell, to be able to work his way into this top division and be competitive with every single person in the light heavyweight roster. With Santos, I always feel like he's going to kind of run aground against someone that's a good technician, like he did against Glover Teixeira. He can have a good first round, he can land some big power shots, look like he's going to get the fight won, but then when it comes down to just simple basics of mount escape and keeping your hands up and keeping your feet underneath you when you're punching, they're the points when he starts to become vulnerable to the high level technicians. And it doesn't always go towards the more technical fighter. But I do feel in this case that Ankalaev is the one that's going to be the favourite going in, and it's going to be Santos that will be pressured and trying to find those opportunities to land his big, powerful shots. The more I watch these fights, the more I research these guys, the more I see how skilled they are, and certain things stand out. And for me, Ankalaev is one to watch in this division. You could quite easily see him as an undefeated fighter, and he might be another 10 fights into his record with a belt round his waist and still not have picked up any more losses. I think he's getting better every time, and we'll see how he holds up against the power and the unpredictability of Thiago Santos.